Welcome everyone to Just Onside. I'm your host Ahmed Badio Baghdadi, and I'm joined by the man who's going to be about as composed as Patrick Bamford was on the weekend with his penalty, Ayub Patel, and the man who might declare himself a fan of moments again after this Arsenal bottle job, Uwais Ahmed. How are we doing, gents?
Well, I was doing fine. Sorry, Owen. I was doing fine until you mentioned that name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Favorite player. Yeah.
Doing okay, my friend. Good to see you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Yeah, good. So, Badge, you may be quite harsh on myself and you, but I'll extend some hospitality and suggest that it's lovely to have you back. It's not the same without you.
Oh, that's nice. This is great.
Very sweet, isn't it?
I
Yeah.
just get to have jabs at you guys, and I don't get nothing back. That's
Yeah, it's
brilliant.
very emotional, that, Owen.
There's still time.
There's
Obviously,
still time.
obviously, you're not happy with just a two-man job, me and you. Now I know. I know where I stand.
Boys,
nothing, nothing personal, you.
as we're starting this, I'm just realizing AC Milan and Inter Milan, the second leg is about to start. I believe Inter Milan are the home side this time. Am I correct? Yep. Just quick prediction on that. What do we think? Can AC Milan turn that around? It's a 2-0 deficit. It's not really a home and away for either side, to be honest. Is there any chance to bring it back? The boy Leao is back, which improves their chances. But your thoughts quickly.
Just from my perspective, I think you suggested about whether there's a home advantage or and what have you. I think the ticket allocation does work that way.
Yeah.
I believe so. There will be more Inter fans in the stadium than AC. I thought long and hard actually about this game. I fancied a little bit of drama, but I think in the end, just looking at that first leg and how it turned out, sometimes a different dynamic when you have to hold on to a lead, let's say, and the other team clearly knows what they have to do, which is kind of go out, chase goals and what have you. But I fancy a 2-2 draw. I think it'll be relatively open. Layout back gives them definitely some speed and trickery. And yeah, I fancy 2-2, and I think Inter make their way through to a Champions League final.
Inter will go through. I can't see Inter not going through, but I'm expecting a reaction after what the ultras thought of the performance. So I'm expecting that certainly AC Milan, the players, will probably be reacting, want to give a performance that I suppose will I suppose give the fans something to sort of think at least the players are giving it the best. But I can't see a 2-0 goal deficit. It's a little bit too much for AC to pull back. So for me, probably a draw, 1-1, 2-2. I think always probably might be right, 2-2, but in to go through.
No, I agree. I hate to say it. I'd love for AC Milan to come back and win the game. And it's funny you mentioned the ultras thing. Having been at the San Siro this season, those guys they are unbelievably passionate. I've never seen anything like it, to be honest. And yeah, I'm sure the players would have taken their words on. I wouldn't want to let them guys down, so I'm expecting a good performance from them today. I think they'll win, but narrowly win. Maybe eke out a win, but it won't be enough. I think Inter Milan will go through in the end. 2-0 is just, yeah, it's not the greatest scoreline for AC. But yeah, moving on into our first topic of the day, which is Arsenal. Arsenal, I'm sure you're going to love this, Uwais, by the way. The question we're posing today is, was Arsenal's season a failure, given that they had the 8-point lead? It came to the crunch and they seem to have crumbled and not managed to bring home the league title. I mean, there still technically is a chance, but in reality, it's likely gone. So I just wanted your thoughts, guys. And there have been a few pros that have been coming out as well this week. Like Martin Keown came out against he's speaking out on TalkSport against Martin Tyler and Gary Neville. And they thought he believes they're being biased against Arsenal. Gary Neville's been very, very, I don't want to say outspoken, but he's been true to his word. He predicted early in the season that this is the time they would crumble, and they have, and he's reiterated that message. And to be fair, he presented his opinion at the time. It's turned out to be fact. So yeah, I just wanted to know your guys' thoughts on the whole matter and whether you deem their season a failure or a success. I will let you go first, no matter.
I'll keep it short and sweet because I'm absolutely sure that Brother OS has got plenty to say on this. It's one that I suppose at the start of the season. I mean, at the start of the season, if you say to Arsenal fans, if you say to Arsenal Football Club, a second place finish, are you happy with that? Of course, yes. But a season's fluid. You can't just, I suppose, have an expectation at the start of the season and that's it. So for me, it at the start of the season, I would absolutely say yes. It's an excellent performance, and I think there's been tremendous progress. They've played well. I think Arteta finally has his print on the team. I think there's a way of playing. I think he's got all the players on side. I think we've seen some exceptional performances. We've seen some rebirths as well. I mean, Xhaka. A lot of people thought that he was gone.
Yeah.
So tremendous improvements. But ultimately, when you have a lead that they did, and then and it's in a sense it is. I mean, I at one stage said that they didn't choke, but they have. They have. I think the pressure's got to them. The expectations got to them. I think the realization that they possibly could win a league title just got too much. So ultimately, and we obviously speak to some of the Arsenal fans, apart from OS, who are absolutely distraught. So it sort of reflects the fact that they are extremely disappointed, and maybe it has been a disappointing and ultimately a season of what may have been, what could have been, but ultimately a season that's going to be perhaps rude, because I'm not sure whether they were going to be able to do what they've done this season, be in a position of such a lead going into about 5 or 6, 7, 8 games. So for me, ultimately a failure of a season. OS is up to you. It's over to you now.
You know what? You know what? Before I even give it to us, I agree with some of the points you've made. Definitely, where there have been players that have stepped up, like Xhaka, and have improved drastically under the coaching of Arteta. So you got to give credit where it's due. Their signings have all been good on the whole. I just feel like you said, I don't know if whether this opportunity will come again for them. Not the fact that they could challenge for the title, they could, but to be 8 points ahead, with only 10 to go, I don't know if that will happen again. And they showed it when the going got tough. They did get going, unfortunately. It's a tough one to come back from. I don't obviously at the start of the season, if you said they'd finished second and would have challenged, no one would say it was a failure. And I still don't say it's a failure of a season. It's just more so it's it's a season of what could have been, and they're never great because you've sacrificed other cup competitions to focus on the league, and now you put all your eggs in one basket, but then you fumble that as well. So it's tough. It'll feel very unfulfilling for a lot of Arsenal fans. I think once the season ends and they could take a step back and look at it, then they might think it was a good season and all for them, especially because of the progress they've made. But at the end of the day, you know how me and you value silverware, and the fact
Yeah.
Arsenal haven't won any this season and finished second after leading for 93% of the season. I think that's what hurts. You know, if they were just challenging in the sense they were second and they were keeping up with Man City, it's a different story. But the fact they led, yeah, I think there'll be disappointment for sure. But then I think once the dust settles, there'll also be a lot of optimism for next season. But whether they find themselves in that position again, I'm not sure. I'm
I
not sure.
just before OS, you say your piece on this. I'd almost disagree with the last point that you made, that when the dust settles, they'll reflect on the season being a success. I almost think it's the other way around, because if
I
you
wouldn't say it's
contextualize,
success. Yeah,
but
I
it's
guess.
contextualizing. It's what you said, that at the stage when there were 8 points, it was theirs to lose, and that I think will be a hurtful thing for Arsenal, because it it City, I won't sort of say they were out of it, but really it seemed a mountain to climb, and it really needed an implosion from Arsenal. So I think from that point of view, if I was an Arsenal fan, I'd be gutted that so close, but yet so far. And I suppose thinking, well, will we be in this position again? So ultimately, I think it's a disappointing season and one that I'd consider a failure.
I think that's where you and I differ from Arsenal fans, because a lot of Arsenal fans have suddenly gone back to that narrative of, oh, we only wanted top four anyway, which is hilarious given they've been leading
Yeah,
the
a lot
entire
of them
season.
have
Yeah, they've
switched off
suddenly,
their
oh yeah,
social
top four is
media.
fine. But I think the work Mikel Arteta has done he's done a brilliant job, to be fair to him. He's improved a lot of players. He's signed players that fit into their system as well. But the big names, the big players in that team, just they, they didn't step up when required, and it feels harsh to say this, given it's you're playing against you're playing in a league and you're up against a force so dominant like Man City. You can't slip up. Like even your top players, they can have 28 excellent games, but then that final 10, if they don't deliver, that's when it matters. So yeah, for me, not a failure, but it's a success in the sense they've progress, but it's not a success if you just take the title race into account.
Otis is chomping at the bit. He
Yeah.
can't wait.
That's what I might do that thing that you used to at uni where you had the ands and the ors, hit up that word count, make him itch.
Yeah.
No, anyways, go ahead, buddy.
No, very good. Honestly, some really superb points made by the two of you. Obviously, you differ in your conclusions at the end, and ultimately, football is a game of opinions, and I think we can all respect that. I would like to take some of your points in order, if I can, though, before I maybe share what I wanted to share, which is Ayub's right. You're both right, actually, on the point about how they will view this season. Right. And that ultimately will come down to how they prepare for next season and how they kind of kick on. And that's where perhaps sports psychology comes in and other such preparational methods come in for next season. Right. So the proof's in the pudding next season, whether or not Arsenal will let this disappointment at the end of the season linger and kind of filter through to next season, let's say, or do they use that as some sort of fuel to go again, right? And ultimately, you don't prove that in the papers, in the columns with sound bites. Or what you prove that ultimately on the pitch, and that's what we all love about sports. I think what I would say about the 8-point lead, just again, I want to first deal in what some of the facts are, which is they did have an 8-point lead, but ultimately Man City did have a game in hand at the time. And if you look at Man City's record in the last 14 games, they've won 13 and drawn 1. So I think it's fair to assume, I don't think it's too far, let's say, far-fetched to suggest that that's ultimately in reality. And although, Badge, many episodes you've mentioned consistently that it's about having points on the board, and I think that's fair, but ultimately, in reality, that's 5 points. And Arsenal played Man City twice during that time, so they had an opportunity to obviously take points off Man City as well. So again, being fair. Again, one more fact that I want to deal with. There's been a lot of talk, as you mentioned, about the expectations at the start of the season and ultimately that it has to be fluid. And I agree with that assessment. Expectation at the start of the season was to obviously go further and do better ultimately than what they did last year, which was finish 5th outside the Champions League spots. I'm not a huge proponent of top 4, never have been in terms of what it means, but ultimately you want to be trying to get back up there challenging. Arsenal haven't done that since, I would argue, the last time they won the title. And that's obviously close to 20 years ago now. So given that they've taken huge steps, I think they can take some solace from that. But to your point, Ayub, ultimately it is fluid, right? And you have to amend your expectations accordingly, or at least amend your aims kind of during the games, right? During the season. And they were in a fantastic position. Whether they'll be in this position next season or the season after or the coming seasons will be down to Arteta and the players having the wherewithal to go again. I just want to kind of go through a few points, if I may. I think some of this, in terms of the narrative over the last couple of days, is about not just how we measure football, but ultimately how we consume football. And what I mean by that is it's interesting that we dumb down this narrative ultimately to one word, whether the season was a failure or success. Football, we've spoken about it on many episodes, on many different, for many clubs. It's this complex world of you have to get your management right, you have to get the ownership right, the recruitment has to be on board. Then after, you're talking about fitness, sports science, medical science, every last little thing, tactics, strategy, rest, recovery, nutrition, every last little aspect now gives you those extra 1 or 2% to be able to achieve certain results. We know football now is as complex and as complicated and as tactical, let's say, than ever. Yet at the end of that, when the results are then forged, we simply want to boil and dumb it down to this one word, which is, was it a success or was it a failure? And I understand that we keep score in professional sports for a reason. But what I mean is, if it's as complex and as complicated in terms of how we go about trying to achieve said results, I would also argue that our analysis and narrative and viewpoints about when we finally assess said season should also be complex and complicated. It should be more than simply just one word. And that's what I would say. Another example.
Just to interrupt, you made the agenda, right?
Yes.
I made the.
No,
he's made us answer it and then come out like a smart ass himself. I love that.
No. But what I'm saying is that was the narrative, right, over the last couple of days, and we have to cover topics that are being discussed ultimately in recent times, and that was the big story coming out from the weekend's games. The other example that I would give is we often measure the footballing season as we should, right? I don't want to be a smart aleck. We measure the season from game 1 to game 38, right? Let me offer a slightly different perspective. It's true that Arsenal in season 2022 and 2023, after being in such a strong position, ultimately fell short of what they would have hoped to have achieved. I'm not disputing that. But if you look at, for example, last year when Aubameyang left in February by mutual consent, the argument then at the time was, well, if we want to get into top 4, we need a striker who's going to score us goals. And obviously Arteta took the decision, right? And he got a lot of credit for that. Not necessarily at the time, but I guess more so this season, right? In terms of the way the squad's developed. And therefore, we evaluate Arsenal, a decision that he took halfway through last season, stripping him of the captaincy and then letting him leave the club at a time when Arsenal really needed goals in order to try and achieve their objective. He let the player leave, a strong player, a captain leave, because he ultimately saw that in the short term we may suffer, but in the midterm and long term, hopefully we will thrive. And what you've seen this season is at least one element of those young players now spreading their wings and being able to forge. So what I mean is the evaluation of Arsenal, I could argue should be done over 2 seasons, if that makes sense. So what I mean is, yes, in the short term, last season, they fell short of their objectives, but it was also with a view to seeing what they could achieve in the future seasons, allowing these kind of young players to thrive and getting such perhaps a negative influence out. So again, I'm not suggesting that we should look at it from a 2 season. What I'm simply saying is we sometimes boil it down to 1 season. I'm simply saying sometimes we have to look at it overall. They've come up short this season. They may well succeed next season, and we may look upon it saying they use that as motivation to go again. Again, will they, won't they? None of us know. But again, I would simply say maybe perhaps the Arsenal story in terms of Mikel Arteta's reign as manager of this football club is yet to be written. So again, that's something that I would just offer. One of the final points that I will have in kind of just the opening gambit is just, I think there is sometimes this entitlement that comes with fans. I mean, Badge, you mentioned the 93% stat that they've led for 93% of the season, which I'll come on to. But there is this entitlement that comes with fans. And I do understand where it comes from, right? We're all supporters of football clubs. Are you diehard Leeds supporter? Badge, you love Manchester United. I love Arsenal. And yet, I think the way in which we consume sports is because ultimately we're in social media groups and we're in chat groups with friends, and we see friends and we see family, and it's great. That's what makes sport lovely, right? It's this wonderful mix. It evokes emotions that none of us would do without, right? My only point is that what's happened over time is because of whether it's bragging rights or whether it's the ability to hold our heads high and what have you, we have this thing that because this entitlement that we simply have to win. We have to win because I want to be able to hold my head up high. And I think part of sports and part of football is understanding that actually, for me, that responsibility is on the viewer. The viewer is the one, or the consumer or the supporter is the one who's making that mistake. The club is trying everything that they can. I can't point to anything that Arsenal have done this season in terms of the way they've prepared, in terms of the way they've gone about it, that I can point to saying, they should have done this and they should have done that. My point simply is, I don't understand where this entitlement comes to say it was ours. You have to earn it over 38 games. And they were doing great. And then they came unstuck and they didn't handle those situations well. But I think for fans, and I'm not suggesting that Piers Morgan is an Arsenal fan, and he says he is, but it's not, I don't understand that type of rhetoric, which is that ultimately we must win. You compete and you compete to the best of your abilities. And ultimately, if there's a better team out there and a team that may well be on course of a treble, you doff your cap and you say, we'll go again, hopefully next season. So I don't understand sometimes where that rhetoric comes from. And sport ultimately has always been like that. It's simply us as a consumer and as a viewer and as a supporter that turns it into this my team should always win mentality. And again, I don't really understand that. So
What?
I don't
No,
think that's the argument,
that's
though, is
not.
it?
That's
Really, it's
not. Yeah, that's not true at all.
yeah,
I,
because
I don't. I
this,
don't agree with that.
yeah. I mean, I don't think it's a it's a discussion on. I think it's a discussion on the Arsenal season. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's 38 games, and ultimately you should be judged on 38 games. But it's broken down. I think you have to break down seasons. You look at various moments in the season, and at the stage they were 8 points ahead, they were overwhelming favourites to win the league, and they were playing well. And they'd got to that position not through chance, but by playing exceptional football. Everything was in their favour. And really, again, it's that it was theirs to lose. It wasn't Manchester City's to win. It was theirs to lose, and that's really what
this
I'm
is,
looking at.
but this is where I disagree. That's my point, and I've been consistent with this. The idea that they led from start till where they led to is kudos to them, right? But those remaining points weren't theirs to lose. That's my point. You have to earn it on the pitch. And you can argue that in games, they've not dealt with situations well. That's fine. I think they are open for discussion and open for criticism there. That's fine. But on the one hand, you have pundits and sports commentators saying when Arsenal were leading from the start, the narrative at times, often from pundits who are champions playing for their respective clubs, whether it's Manchester United, Liverpool, whoever they support, is suggesting titles are decided in April and May. That's always been the narrative. Don't get ahead of yourselves. It's decided in April, May. And by the way, that's a fair evaluation.
Only Gary Neville came out with that, in fairness.
No, but it's always been that way because there's a certain
pressure. But like
pundits
nowadays, as soon as Arsenal would win a game, they'd be like, okay, they're on the course to win it.
Yeah,
and it was when he said that you actually can't. But he said it when the 20 games had been played, and I think Arsenal had won a game that weekend, and then they asked him again, "Have you changed your mind?" He's like, "Why am I going to change my mind? It starts in April," and he reiterated that message, and he stuck by his guns, and he. Go on, sorry.
No, I was going to say I don't disagree with you, and that's my point. Because what I'm trying to get at is if it's not decided in the first 7 months, you could put yourself in a great position, right? Which Arsenal did. But if it's not decided in the first 7 months and it's decided in those crucial moments when you have to play pressurized games and when you're televised and you're going before or after, whenever it may be, than your nearest rivals, and your nearest rivals are winning every single week, there's a pressure that's different to the first 6 games. I am not disputing that. But my point is this. That's what I'm saying. The title was never theirs to lose because they hadn't gone through that experience of showing the rest of the world in the footballing world whether they could handle that. So my point simply on that one point is you can't argue, well, they led from all the way and yet now they quote unquote bottle it. My point is those points were there to be won yet, and that's where Arsenal still had to prove to all of us whether they could do it. They couldn't. So for me, the first 7 months are irrelevant. You can't have it both ways. You can't argue you were leading from the start. Why couldn't you just finish it? But then also argue, well, hang on, nothing's won in January. You got to show it in April and May. You can't have it both ways. What I'm simply saying is it's over the totality of the season, and Manchester City have been better. I mean,
but I think the point is, if they didn't have such a lead, then there's a difference. It's the fact they had such a lead, which then puts everything's in their hands at that point. Man City can win all the games in the world after that. It doesn't matter as long as Arsenal don't slip up. And that's what people mean when it's in their hands. It's like, what's a good example? Like AC Milan versus Liverpool, that Istanbul final. AC Milan are winning 3-0 at half time. The game's in their hands. Like, but that doesn't mean they can't slip up, but it's in their hands. Like I know you said last time that if one team can score 3 in one half, why can't the other score in the other?
It's different. It's different.
That team, yeah, exactly. That team's behind. So for AC Milan to then go and blow that, it was in their hands to like manage that game after that.
Agreed.
But and it's the same with Arsenal. You got 8-point lead, and you've got games coming up where City can only win it if you slip up. and you're not like got a 1 point difference or anything. You got 8 point difference.
Yeah, but let
But
me
it
give
is in their hands in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a difficult one when you compare one final Champions League final in terms of one particular 90 minutes, then let's say over the course of 10, 12 games, right? Which is the kind of title running. The only thing I would say to that, and this is not an argument, by the way, I would make, it's simply in the context of what you just said, is that ultimately, if you look at the 36 game mark, obviously they've lost to Brighton, but if you look at the fact, and I don't use this, by the way, as an excuse, let me be very clear. But if Arsenal had simply, and I say simply, it's difficult, but if they had split the Man City games and perhaps if they'd got that factually incorrect decision at home to Brentford, I'm not complaining, by the way. It's happened. We move on. But what I'm saying is they could have had a chance to hold on to that 1-0 win. I'm just saying, if you look at that, that could have just been the difference because that's a kind of 7-8 point swing. My point is these are tight margins and Arsenal haven't dealt with that situation well. And you're right, away to West Ham, they will regret that situation. Home to Southampton, they will regret that situation. Not holding on to that game against Liverpool, especially what it would have meant psychologically, because it was the first tough game, let's say, going into that run-in. And if they'd picked up 3 points at Anfield, I wouldn't have even been surprised if the psychological pressure shifted to Man City and maybe they dropped points because they would have felt, wow, they've navigated a tough game at Anfield. So I'm fully on board with that. I just can't get on board with the narrative that the season's been a failure because I don't think any other team, I think if you asked any other team if they wanted to be in Arsenal's position other than Man City, they would have taken it. I think also if you ask Arsenal that they're in the same position next season, of course they'd take it. But I also think the other 18 teams would take it, in my humble opinion. So it's relative. Success is relative. There are some teams that'll be on the last Sunday celebrating because they'll have finished 17th. Hopefully, Ayub's team is one of them. I'm saying success is relative for different teams. And yes, Arsenal, from the position they were in, they would have hoped to have achieved something magical. But the idea to label the season a failure is ultimately a step too far.
I mean, that last part was a fair assessment. To your other point about fans are the ones that make this narrative that we have to win, win, win. I mean, I can't disagree with that anymore. I mean, if you're an elite footballer playing for one of the top clubs, if that's not your mentality, then something's wrong.
I didn't say I didn't say win games.
No. Win. That like your goal is to win everything, and that has to be like for fans. Some delude themselves into thinking they're going to win the works when we know they're not. That's on them. But for others to expect to win a league when you've got a significant lead, I don't think anyone was expecting you to win the league beforehand. Even halfway through, you probably had a mix of we still want top four to winning the league, but I wouldn't hold it against fans if their expectations then suddenly changed to we should win the league given the position we're in and the points we have in the bag at the moment. I mean, that's just natural, especially if you're a top club. And Arsenal historically are in English football, they've been a top club. So
true, but they haven't challenged for the title for the best part of 2 decades.
Yeah, no, of course. But then, all right, my team hasn't challenged either. They haven't challenged in 10 years. We finished second a few times, but we've been miles off. But the point is, if I was in the position if United were in the position Arsenal were in, I would 100%. Your goalposts move. Like I'm sure Arsenal in their behind the scenes also had that conversation halfway through the season where like actually it might not just be Champions League here. We can actually push on and win the league. So they would have changed their goalposts behind the scenes as well. It wouldn't have been as stringent as City's, where City's you have to win it. I think they would have changed their goalposts to we can now compete for this title. So I think I wouldn't say it's just fans that make that narrative. It's footballers and their winning mentalities that do it. Unfortunately for Arsenal, they couldn't keep it up.
I'd expect if I was an Arsenal fan now and the players were interviewed, I'd expect them or I'd want them to say it's a failure. Because really, as a professional sportsman, it's what you were saying as well, Baj. It has to be. I mean, I'm going to contextualize. At the stage that we're 8 points ahead, I would expect every player now to sort of think, right, this is a glorious opportunity we've spurned. And as a professional footballer, I would expect that to equate to a failure of some sort. Maybe you can, in overall, you can sort of say, yeah, it's been a decent season. But certainly as a professional footballer playing for Arsenal, I would hope that they say, ultimately, it's a failure. From where we were to where we are now, I'd consider it a failure. And that's really what I'd want, because that, to me, shows a hunger in a football player. And that's really, for me, what sport is about. I know, obviously, we slightly differ, but I would be incredibly disappointed if I was an Arsenal football player.
Just a couple of things, if I can, please. I don't think I articulated that point about the fans in the most, not in the most in the smartest way. I'd like to take that opportunity to correct what I meant to say. What I meant to say is that ultimately, whether it's forums like Talk Sport or other sports channels and other podcasts or whatever it may be, there is these absolutes that we used in our words, in our conclusions, in our clickbait narratives, let's say, yeah. And one of the things that we discussed when we put this initiative together to do this podcast is that we wanted to be authentic in our thoughts, and I think we absolutely are, and that's what I love about doing this. And what I'm simply saying is that's why I struggle with this question, because that's what the sports media, that's the media narratives, is always these absolutes. We need a conclusion. Who's had a better season? If this team's failed, it's never nuanced. And what I'm simply trying to say is that it then feeds into the psyche of fans when you hear Roy Keane talk on Super Sunday about, yeah, it's just about wins and it's about losses. And I get that. Professional sports, again, that's why we keep a scoreline, yeah? But my point is that it feeds into this kind of psychology of fans. Of course, Arsenal fans wanted their team to win the title. I'm one of them. I wanted my team to win the title, and I'm disappointed that they didn't ultimately achieve that. What I'm simply saying is I manage my expectation to understand that if they've come up short, you hope that's not the end of the story. And that's what I'm saying. So yes, we take the disappointment of this season and you take that into next season and you continue to build. There's nothing.
That's fine, but we were talking from a perspective of just this season, not how it leads into next season or last season, just in the context of this season. And I think that's where you can draw that line, whether it's a success failure. I don't see how, apart from obviously being in the title race, it's still a successful season in terms of development. It's not a success in terms of the title race, obviously, but I think it's fair to say that.
I'm going to reiterate my position as to what I want from my football team. Yeah, whether it's my football team or whether it's my NBA team. By the way, I'm sporting a Lakers cap, but anyway, we digress. The point I'm just making is there is no entitlement. All I ask from my teams is to be super competitive.
If you're a City fan, are you saying you wouldn't feel like you should be winning the league every season?
I can't speak for Man City fans, but
but if Arsenal were that.
Yeah, absolutely.
They
you mentioned during the Pep Guardiola discussion, they did not bring him to win league titles. They brought him to win Champions League titles, right? And Man City have a history, whether it's the championship that they won with Mancini, championship that they won with Pellegrini, and now obviously Guardiola's got a stranglehold, yeah, other than obviously his first season and then the season when Liverpool won the title. Absolutely. And that's where Man City are ahead of Arsenal Football Club, and Man City won the league.
But then that's entitlement as well, isn't it?
It's not an entitlement, but I think Man City can honestly and objectively say that they are the best team in this country.
No, and but I mean, their fans, if their fans are like, we got to be winning the league this year. It is entitlement, but it's justified.
Is it? Oh, right. Yeah. I think the second part is entitlement. Maybe, I suppose, for me, means that there's an unrealistic expectation. If it's a realistic expectation, which obviously it is in Man City's case, it's a realistic expectation. So therefore, as a City fan, surely, if you expect your team to win the league, that's not entitlement. That's just, I suppose, it's a matter of fact.
And when you've won it in a number of years, right, it becomes the norm. Anything short of that, it's the same was during the Manchester United years during Ferguson, right? And that's the greatness of the coach, right? You win titles consecutively all the time, right? You won 13 Premier League titles. Anything less than that was obviously, because once you start winning, anything less, unless circumstances change massively. And even now, Manchester United still feel the effects, right, of not, or feeling, let's say, the difficulty of not challenging because of what they once were, which was this behemoth. They're still the biggest club in the country. All I'm getting at is I ask my club, because they didn't do this for 2 decades, and they now have an opportunity because they've shown me this year What they have to show is that this was not a fluke. What they have to show is that they have to be consistently challenging Manchester City. And if they consistently challenge, I can live with it, because that is the obligation, I think, for any big club. And Arsenal are a big club, like Badge said. So have they met the first most important objective, which they haven't done for the best part of 2 decades? Yes. The next step will be to go that one big step further. And it's a huge step. It might feel like it's only a few games here and there, but it's a huge psychological step to go head to head with this monster of a football team. Liverpool managed it, not many have, and to go and obviously hopefully at some point secure a Premier League title. But again, it's part of a process, and ultimately there should be this nice conclusion at the end of this process. Where we are currently, Arsenal, I'm happy with the process. I'm just simply saying, let's see the proofs in the pudding for future seasons. And I can't tell you that they'll be there next year. They also have to prove that to me as well.
Yeah, not convinced.
Slip that in.
I don't
What's
know if
the
you want to
final
touch.
word? Not
I
convinced.
don't want to. I don't know if you want to touch on the Martin Keown thing. I don't think there's. I wouldn't say there's bias per se. I think, like I've said, Neville's stuck to his guns. He's been proven right in the end. I think Arsenal fans obviously didn't like hearing it, because who would, about their own club? But I mean, what it's coming from a guy who's constantly won league titles, constantly been in title races that he's lost as well. So it came from a place where the guy's got the knowledge. He knows what he's talking about in these kind of situations. I don't think there's bias against it. I think he's right for saying, like, if he's right in the sense that they've dropped 12 points in the last 7 games. Like, that's great. If you're leading by 8 points and you've got aspirations to win the title, that's shocking.
I would like to comment on it, if I may.
Yeah, go for
just
it.
just on the Martin Keown. So just to kind of bring it to the viewers' attention, and you absolutely mentioned it during your introduction, Badge. You nailed it. Martin Keown was alluding to the fact that the commentary on Sunday in the match against Brighton at the Emirates, that there was some element of bias from Martin Tyler and Gary Neville during the course of the game. And obviously Martin Keown recently has had a, let's say, I would say a friendly verbal spat with Rio Ferdinand when he spoke about Arsenal as winners. So it's kind of been bubbling under the surface, let's say, with him. I strongly disagree with his views for 2 main reasons. One, it's always difficult to prove bias. How do you prove it? It's very difficult. Secondly, why does it matter? Ultimately, the journey that Arsenal are on, is it a case about winning media narratives and saying, oh, this commentator's biased, or Gary Neville's being harsh to us, or whatever it may be? And by the way, I don't believe Gary Neville has ever been harsh in that sense. His commentary about Arsenal's title challenge throughout the course of the season has been measured, and I think has been balanced. And he's often mentioned. So yesterday he spoke about how Arsenal have had an exceptional season. He spoke about how he wants Arsenal actually to win the title. He's hoping that these young players have an opportunity in the coming years. So I don't think it's anything personal with him. I think he's just, to your point, speaking from experience. But going back to the Martin Keown point, I think it's the wrong time to make such points as well. Arsenal obviously have to take their lumps. They lost a huge game, deservedly so. And I don't think it's the right time for an ex-Arsenal footballer to be suggesting a narrative that ultimately sounds like sour grapes. I think what you have to be, and that's what I mean about this entitlement that creeps in, it's kind of this kind of lashing out when you think things aren't going well for you. To your point, Gary Neville has been fairly measured, yeah, just because we don't like to hear it. But this is my point about the fans, right? It becomes this, and I don't want to use the word again, the entitlement, but it erodes this.
I wouldn't say this is entitlement. I
No,
think
no, no,
he's just being a little.
no, about the fans. What I mean is, the fans get this feeling. Sport does this thing where it blinds you to honesty. It erodes honesty. Honesty was that Arsenal simply just had to prove that they could overcome. If they overcome it, I bet you, if Arsenal were to next season come again, let's say for example, and you may be skeptical, but if they go again and they finish really strong, and let's say somehow miraculously they win the Premier League title, I think at that point, a lot of media would be fair and say, you know what, they may well be here to stay in terms of how they've gone about it. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I think, again, going back to Martin Keown, A, wrong timing, B, hard to prove, and C, why does it matter? Ultimately, when you lose, you simply try and work hard to improve. It's not about proving bias. Ultimately, say what if they are biased? I don't see what that achieves. I mean, yeah, maybe
he's generating clicks for his channel, which yeah, the less I say about the better. Are you any thoughts? Or are we moving on?
Let's move on. Let's move
Let's
on.
move on. That's enough. That's enough about the big boys. Let's put things into perspective here. The battle at the bottom. The battle at the bottom. Ayub. Oh, it's not looking good, buddy. It's not looking good. Leeds United, to be fair, gained a good point against Newcastle. They weren't expected to. Big Sam has instilled a bit of fight in them. But with the results for the other clubs going in certain ways, Ayub, has the doom and gloom set in?
I'm not too sure how sort of felt after the weekend. I was disappointed. Again, it goes back to this conversation we're having about entitlement. Before the game, I would have taken a point because against Newcastle, the form that we're in, it was a huge obstacle to get a point before the game. Absolutely, but again, it's contextualized. After the game, I'm absolutely gutted. I'm not going to go into too much detail because this is not a Leeds podcast, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. But again, there was a certain character that was pivotal to, I suppose, us not picking up 3 points. So it was very, very disappointing considering we had an opportunity because we are at a stage of the season where it's must wins. It's not just points, it's must wins because I suppose other clubs at the bottom have got points where it wasn't expected that they were going to get points. So certainly from a Leeds point of view, on the one hand, yes, pleasing, it's a point. I suppose based on the game and what transpired, absolutely gutted. Everton, as expected.
Hold on.
Lost.
Are you just gonna a certain character and then just brush over it? I mean, you can go into depth. This is your team, and I know it's not Leeds podcast, but you're embroiled in a huge relegation battle right now. So you can elaborate.
I'm absolutely. There's been lots of abuse pointed in the direction or thrown in the direction of Patrick Bamford. And I think to a certain extent, rightly so. I think he's been, not just recently, for the last 2.5 years, he's one of the most, I think he's never, in my opinion, never been Premier League class. He's missed crucial chances that ultimately I think will cost us. So I don't know what else to say because I think as a fan, what he does and what he's done doesn't surprise me. The penalty initially when he was I think it did it for ego. I think it's something that I've mentioned to some that the reason why I think he was insistent on taking the penalty. Apparently, I've not seen. Somebody did say that Rodrigo had the ball, then Bamford took the ball off Rodrigo, and I think he did it primarily for ego because he's got a lot of criticism. So he's probably taken the penalty or wanted to take the penalty to say, right, okay, I'm going to show you lot.
Unless he's your designated kicker.
He is, but Rodrigo's taken penalties when Bamford's been on the pitch as well. So I think it's very much, I think, based on, I suppose, who feels more confident. Now, if that's the case, then it's Rodrigo, hands down. So Rodrigo's got the ball. So I presume he's got the ball with the intention of taking the penalty. He's not made a scene. He's not sort of kept the ball. He's allowed Bamford to take it. But I think that was an ego-driven initiative by Bamford. He's put the ball on the spot. Then the real Bamford sort of steps up. I think if you looked in his eyes, it was fear. You could see the camera pan into the crowd, people with their hands over their eyes. I don't think there's any Leeds fan who thought he was going to score. Now, when he missed predictably, or when it was saved by predictably, a poor penalty. My goodness me, this is a centre forward in the Premier League who is designated a penalty taker, or at least he is one of the penalty takers. That was his 4th miss in 9 attempts. That's unacceptable. Yeah, exactly. That is unacceptable. That is disgraceful. He has received a torrent of abuse, very vitriolic, very personal. Lines have been crossed. I can, to a certain extent, I can see the frustration and anger in people because this is a man who continually disappoints. He's a man that is on £70,000 a week.
Is he actually?
He's on 70,000 a week, 3.5 million a year. So he's on a sizable income. he's missed an opportunity against Leicester, a crucial opportunity, a game-winning opportunity. He scores this 2-0. You never know. I mean, I suppose with Leeds, I spoke to us offline, and he said with Leeds, you can never tell that that's going to be enough, but we'll never know. But at least it would have put us in a really good, strong position. So these are misses that perhaps could cost the club over 100 million. These are misses that will perhaps doom us to the championship. So I'm annoyed, angry, frustrated. A little bit of. I want to sort of pay respect to Big Sam as well, though, because when I saw the side initially, it's a slightly different tangent, but just to give credit to Big Sam, when I saw the side, I was thinking, what on earth is he doing? He's playing a right back at centre back. He's playing a centre back at the midfield. But it worked. It worked. A couple of silly mistakes, stupid mistakes, which is, again, it's symptomatic of the season that we've had. That no matter how much a coach does, individuals are making mistakes. So from a Leeds point of view, disappointed, gutted. Whether it's terminal, who'll know? But very, very disappointed. But going on to other results, Everton, as expected, they lost. I was expecting that to be a banana skin. I really thought that after the efforts that City put in 30 degrees heat in Madrid, I thought he might be resting some key players, which obviously he rested KDB, but he played enough of the big guns. So thankfully, that was a fantastic result. Just a quick comment on Gundogan's first goal. I don't know what you guys thought, but I just thought that was one of the most exceptional goals for the reason, if you look at the trajectory of the ball as it's coming, Gundogan actually, initially he moves his leg, and then his brain obviously is computing at such a fast pace, he sort of realizes that he needs to move his leg in a certain position to allow the ball to hit his thigh. That's quality. That's world-class ability.
A friend of mine actually, he said it was similar to the one Berbatov scored against Liverpool. I think he controlled on his knee, same way the way Gundogan does. His was more, I think he did fall backwards and do a bicycle, but the flick was oof.
Yeah.
But funnily enough, I love the second goal more, the arrogance of that free kick. I'm all about that.
Mine was just, it's, I'm always talking about, I suppose, what differentiates a good player from a great player. And in that moment, I'm not sure how many people perhaps watched it, looked at it, or picked up on that incident. But it was just, if you look at it, it's the movement that he makes. Initially, there's a leg movement, and then he suddenly realizes, whilst the ball's a mid-flight, that he's thinking, no, I need to alter my position to make sure that it hits the thigh, a good part of the thigh, not on the knee, not on the hip, but on the meaty part of the thigh. Absolutely fantastic. Now I'm thinking, if Bamford's there, I don't know, that hits his backside. That's Bamford. Okay, so fantastic. So that a result that I expected. I feared that maybe there might be a banana skin. Forest, that was for me personally a bit of blow. I was expecting Chelsea after the win against Bournemouth to maybe get a result again. So it's all set up. This is, if you like drama in football, it can't get more dramatic than what's happening at the bottom of the table at this moment in time. So my nerves are shredded. Yesterday, the Leicester result, again, excellent result for me as a Leeds fan. But I'm just, I don't know how I can cope with the next 10 days or so. Seriously, I'm just, I can't sleep. I cannot sleep worrying about Leeds. That's how much Leeds at this moment is consuming my life. So from my point of view, a dramatic weekend, a sort of mixed weekend, but we're still in the fight. But it's a must win against West Ham. From a Leeds point of view.
Well, Forest are 3 ahead of you at the moment. Yeah. You know who they've got next?
Yes, they have got the Arsenal.
They do.
So I'd like. What's your thoughts? How OS? What do you think after the result against Brighton? What do you think? Which Arsenal will show up?
Uh, Let me first start off with a compliment, Ayub. You got an Eminem reference in there, and I'm quite impressed. That was quite a good one. However, let me start off with the. Let me also give you some bad news. You mentioned that it's not a Leeds podcast, and it definitely won't be in 2 weeks' time. Let's let's
Kick
make
a man
that
when he's down.
let's make that very clear. I mean, I will come to that question shortly. You mentioned about credit to Big Sam, and I think he definitely got the team ready, right? They looked full of beans at certain parts of that game, even though they were. Yeah, I mean they were going up against a team that's the third best team in the league, right? And Newcastle also played some lovely football at times, but I think Leeds matched them in terms of kind of. And I know these are the basics, right? But effort, application, lots of running. I was impressed even with some of Firpo and Ayling in terms of how far forward they were getting, especially in the first half. And obviously that's where Ayling got his goal from. The only thing I would,
Steam coming out of his ears.
yeah,
Ailing praise.
yeah, I think
I'm gonna give at least Ayling some credit.
Whoa!
He was okay. He was okay. He stepped up to the plate to a certain extent.
To a certain extent. But I think you mentioned about how he played a right back at centre back. One could argue, depending on the narrative, that Werber makes that mistake. Obviously, for the penalty, it's a clumsy challenge, and maybe that's because he's not used to being in those positions. So you can kind of flip it the other way as well.
I mean, just on that point, I mean, it's what precedes that. If you look, there was a guy who, I mean, fair play to him, he got the penalty. But if you look at that tackle that Werber did, I mean, Big Sam post-match said that he was saying to the players, stay on your feet. So Werber, who's an experienced centre-back, obviously didn't take heed. But if you look, Firpo, perhaps if he doesn't slip or he's a little bit more intelligent, he probably would have done something better. So,
yeah. Well, I think with Werber, I think look, when you're playing fullback, you sometimes get used to the kind of sliding. You're normally off and outside of the box. Yeah, you're tackling the winger. Whereas if you're in as a centre back position, you've got to be a bit mindful. It was a stupid challenge. The guy wasn't really going anywhere, and you can't go to ground in the box. If you get a goal, you've got to have 100% success rate in terms of getting that ball. The Firpo one, very quickly. It's just my opinion. I thought it was a little harsh because I genuinely think. Listen, he had a bit of a shocker, right? In that second half, he was really struggling, and I felt for him. It was kind of one of those situations where you
one
felt
of
like
many shockers.
Yeah, and I think it was one of those where you felt like, listen, you might just want to substitute him because just to get him out of there because he was having a difficult period. I just think with the penalty, I mean, listen, Leeds are easy targets right now, right? And it looks like Firpo is making mistake after mistake. I do think he gets a nudge. Nobody falls like the way he does without getting a little bit of a nudge.
But it's if you get nudged, it's the arms. I think the arms were. I mean, it just is ridiculous. I mean, I think if you get pushed, your arms are not going to be there.
Yeah,
I mean, that was the thing. It's.
All I would say is I think the push forced him into a certain position. Now, I'm not saying he was strong enough to give a penalty. I don't have a strong opinion. I just thought it was a little, he could have maybe on another day that could have perhaps been given as a foul, or at least for me. But fine, right? I'm not going to argue it too much. To your point about Leeds in terms of where they stand and the Forest game, the bigger concern I have a little bit, I said bigger concern, is that you play on Sunday, I believe, with West Ham's participation in the Europa Conference League, I believe. So, playing on Sunday after Wolves, Everton, and Forest Arsenal play on Saturday, I mean, that could end things really. If Forest, I mean, Forest are playing home.
It's getting me giddy. All this
No, because you're right. Which Arsenal are going to turn up, right? I mean, they're secure in second. The Premier League title has gone. Do I think I would like Mikel Arteta to be professional and play his best team? Because you have to be professional, right? And there's an integrity to the league, yeah, that you ought to play your best team and go out and put your best effort forward, especially against teams that are fighting for relegation. I think that's just
and mathematically the league's not over, so
it is.
Just be doing,
No, absolutely. But he may. What I'm saying is, if say a player's got a niggle, whereas previously he may be like, no, you're playing, he may just say, well, I'll give Nelson a go. It's more those borderline decisions. But no, look, I don't know what Arsenal will turn up. It's away, Nottingham Forest. I mean, those wins that they got against Brighton and Southampton, I think, really put them in a great position. They've then gone to Stamford Bridge, and I mean, you would have hoped once Chelsea turned it around that they'd hold on, but no. So I mean that's probably so disappointing. I think from a Leeds perspective. I mean, it's really interesting with the goal difference the way it is, because I look at that goal difference and you're minus 25 compared to Everton's minus 24. And I just wonder whether or not, no, if you were level, it could mean different, right? Depending on how the results go. But that extra one minus goal difference could be pivotal depending on how results.
Absolutely. I mean, that sort of shocker of a month that we had where we conceded goals left, right, and centre. I mean, at the time we knew that it probably could come back and haunt us. So it just is. I mean, it's, as I said, as a football fan or a fan of drama in football, this is probably the most exciting relegation battle there's ever been. Because even Southampton, I mean, that was last week. Now, normally, there is always one team that's cut adrift and it's down sort of weeks and weeks before the end of the season. So even Southampton, it was only last week that it was confirmed. I expect again more dramas. In one sense, I'm quite happy that we're playing on Sunday because it sort of it tells you exactly what you need to know. Now it could work both ways. Now if we get the results in our favour, I suppose it could be a tremendous fillip. If perhaps results don't go our way, this is a brittle Leeds United football side, so I don't know whether it'll just be too much. The expectation will be too much, but I mean, I'm clutching at straws at the moment. I'm sort of thinking West Ham. They're playing a cup game, a European Cup game on Thursday. It's an away game, so travelling back early hours Friday morning. Unfortunately, it is a home game for them, so they're not travelling again. But they're mathematically they're not safe, but they are safe. So I'm hoping that they perhaps just take it a little bit easy and perhaps rest certain players.
My concern a little bit.
I don't think so.
I mean, I do actually want to get what Badger's thoughts are, his dispassionate thoughts are in terms of how he sees this shaking out. But I think I'll just finish off very quickly with this. The worry I have for Leeds is very simple. I mean, Badge mentioned it. 3-point difference to Nottingham Forest, which means ultimately even 2 draws doesn't usurp Nottingham Forest's position. And the question is, again, I say it, Leeds and Southampton are the only 2 clubs in the last 6 games that haven't won a game in the league. And ultimately, Leeds need to show that they can win a game of football. And that's why I feel like Forest might just feel like we may be okay, even if we were to lose back-to-back games, because Leicester and Leeds do not look like they're going to win a game anytime soon. The concern is Everton have arguably 2. I don't think that you can say favourable fixtures. It's game week 37 and 38, the pressure's on. But away to Wolves, home to Bournemouth, you feel like if they're going to that home to Bournemouth game, I feel like, especially with that result,
they're safe.
I don't think the Man City. Well, I wouldn't say they're safe. But I think
they're safe.
No, absolutely not. No, I don't see it but I don't think their confidence will have been knocked too much by the Man City result. Let's say I think they'll
determining their season, is it?
Yeah, they'll focus on the Brighton win and what they did. And I think if they go away to Wolves, I wouldn't be surprised if they beat them. They'll probably take a draw and go to Goodison Park for that last game. But all Leeds can hope, to your point, Ayub, is that on Sunday, both of those results, if not at least one of those results, has gone your way to give you a fighting chance going into West Ham. Hopefully they're tired, fatigued, maybe eye off the ball, and Leeds can summon up one big performance. I worry. I mean, Leicester away to Newcastle again. They play Monday night, similar to how they did this week against Liverpool, and obviously they got a pasting. But Newcastle away again Monday night, I think that'll be difficult, especially knowing all the results. They again don't look like they have got any juice in them. But if they do get a point, last game of the season, home to West Ham. So West Ham are going to play a part regardless. So I don't know. I just hope for Leeds that the Saturday results go your way and you can again put something together. One last point, just very quickly. End of the game, I saw very, very quickly, Carl Robinson, assistant coach, you could tell they were making a big deal in terms of, I don't know, Badge is not a fan of team huddles, we know what his thoughts are, but it was a case of trying to, I can understand the thought process, galvanize the fans, make sure you keep the fans engaged. Why? Because we're probably going to need them in that last game of the season, home to Spurs. And I think I can understand it to some extent, but they are trying to create some connection with the fans. And on the whole, it was there on Saturday lunchtime. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. But I do feel for you.
Yeah, I mean, just one, and there's another clutching straws. I'm pretty certain that Moisey and Big Sam are good mates. And I'm just hoping.
Right.
I'm hoping.
I'm gonna let you finish this.
No. I'm not saying anything, but I'm just hoping that a friend in need
Is a friend
Right.
in need.
Okay. Friend in need.
A friend in need is a pain in
Yeah.
the arse.
How do you see it shaking up, Badge?
Yes. See you later, you. It was nice having you on. Commiserations. We ain't doing no championship segments. No, honestly, they have to get 6 points.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
they have to. Can
Yeah.
they win their next 2 games?
No.
West Ham away. I think West Ham they've been picked up lately, right?
How are they winning? How are they winning 2 games? I mean,
They're not, are they? Let's be
I don't.
brutally
I don't.
honest.
Remember, I was quite optimistic going to Newcastle, but even I'm a realist. They're not winning 2 games. I mean,
But they have to. But then your saving grace is you got Spurs at the end.
yeah. But I mean, Spurs,
Spurs.
Son, Kane, maybe a Kulusevski on the counter. I worry.
Yeah, actually,
But let's
Kane. That's a good game for Kane to start padding.
Let's hope
I'm
not.
kidding. I love the guy. I'm kidding. But yeah, you need 6 points, buddy. And
I mean, that's exactly the way that I'm thinking. I'm not thinking 4 points. I'm just thinking
you need 6.
if we're gonna go down, let's go down fighting. That's really what I want. I just want it to be where right. Let's go for it. Obviously not reckless, not gung ho, but certainly don't die wandering. Don't die don't leave the league on a whimper.
You need to cut out individual errors in these last 2 games. If you don't cut those out, you're gonna.
I'm pretty sure
and what Leeds have
every
shown,
manager that we've had is try to do that. As to how you do it,
and it's
that's the hard part, isn't it? Really. So it's
well, it shouldn't be, should it?
It shouldn't be, no, not if you're playing in the
it shouldn't
Premier
be.
League. If you're a Premier League football player,
No.
you shouldn't be making these sort of like rudimentary sort of mistakes. But it is what it is. We are where we are, and it's not through chance.
If you've got any saving grace, it's Wolves' last home game of the season, so they might want to put on a show for their fans.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, I was thinking that. And Crystal Palace again. It's the last game. It's probably sort of Roy's last game as well, because I presume obviously he's not going to be. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, he's not going to be.
I'm not sure. I don't think that's confirmed whether he's going to be there next season.
Maybe I suppose again, if he was just there for a short period of time, maybe they want to put on a show for Roy as well, because he's been fantastic. But these are just I think the thoughts of a desperate man.
Yeah. Of course. We won't delve too much into those thoughts. But what I was going to say is, I remember one of the first podcasts we did, actually, we were discussing relegation candidates. And at the point of Palace, at the time I don't know where their goals are going to come from. And I think I said a similar thing for you guys. But since Roy's come in, they're actually playing great football. Eze has been on fire. He's been a different player under Roy Hodgson. And he's got their majority of their goals. And if you're down there, it is imperative you have a player that can deliver those goals. And I don't know what's going to change in the next game. I don't see Bamford getting on that score sheet. Rodrigo maybe, but then after that, it's just you're going to have to grind. And you're gonna have to grind and try clean.
Well, let's see what Bamford's made of. I mean, I've all the fans,
most now or never, isn't
the
it?
Fans. Yeah. I mean, it's he's obviously got a tremendous amount of flack. Let's see. I mean, the best way to silence the fans is scoring goals. If he scores goals,
what you're there for,
and keeps us up, then he's done his job.
I would say your favourites at the minute too.
Oh yeah. I think what. I mean, I personally sort of think the way the table is right at this moment in time is what it's going to be like after 38 games. Leicester, I think, are down and out. I can't see Leicester. I think the confidence is shot. And us as well. I think we've just got 2 tricky fixtures. I think the other teams have got favourable fixtures.
Yeah.
It's written in the stars.
It's much like the lights fading.
Yes.
On Leeds season, it's fading in your bedroom.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fitting. I don't know whether it's the right use of the word metaphor, but I think it's quite fitting that Even though it's quite bright outside, it's dark inside. So
No. I appreciate your time, gentlemen. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I was just checking. No, the reason why I was just checking the AC Milan Inter score.
Yes,
Half-time
of
or
course.
nearly half-time, 0-0.
No.
Yeah, final thoughts from me, because I would like to just quickly comment on tomorrow's game, Man City against Real Madrid.
This podcast should have been called The Final Thought, and then we could have just rattled on.
Yeah, for sure.
Where's Bash? Where's your stopwatch?
My stopwatch is
That
on.
you were insisting that you were going to really sort of
we have 50 seconds remaining.
Okay.
50 seconds.
Quick comments. Man City Real tomorrow at the Etihad. Really, really difficult game to call, and I'm tempted to say I was gonna chicken out of a prediction because I have that much respect for these two teams. It's so hard. I just feel like perhaps this is the year. City might just sneak through. Don't know how. Don't know whether it's in regulation time, extra time. I just feel like maybe it's their time. So yeah, I'll probably just give City the nod.
Same here. I mean, I can't wait. Honestly, it's going to be a humdinger, and it will be nice to watch two proper football teams playing quality football. I've watched far too much of Leeds this season, and it will be 2-1, 2-1 Man City.
I have a very trusted Real Madrid fan. Sorry, let me rephrase that because that made no sense. I have a trusted friend that's a Real Madrid fan, and he seems to think it'll be 5-2 City, which I don't know where he's plucked that scoreline out from, but I can see it. I can see it, but I'm not going to watch because my team's not in it. I think over the years I've grown to not care about anything that United are in. Before, when I was younger, definitely in my younger years, and viewers may be shocked to learn that I'm not as young as I look. But yeah, I'll be keeping an eye on it. I don't think I'd be watching it for the sheer fact that I have a bad feeling, City may progress here. So for that
that is awful. That is awful. I mean, we should be privileged to watch two teams at the top of their game.
Yeah, and if Real Madrid go through, you best believe I'm watching Real Madrid versus Inter. But yeah, I think I'm gonna stick with Real. I will not go against them. They've proven way too much in this tournament, and every time people have them down and out, they come back and prove everyone wrong. So, and they're not even down and out. It's 2-2, ties level.
1-1.
And 1-1, sorry. Yeah. Ties level.
Oh, it's 1-1. Yeah. It is 1-1. Yeah.
Are you sure you guys watch? But yeah, I think if Real get that first goal, then I think a bit of anxiety, a bit of the nerves start kicking in. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, that has been this episode of Just Onside, guys. Remember to like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Leave a comment down below if we've offended you in any way, shape, or form. I hope we have, because I like the comments personally. And let us know who you think will progress into the finals of the Champions League, and if Arsenal's season was a failure or not.
And any viewers who want to buy me a light, please do so.
Yeah, we're gonna start a Kickstarter because this is ridiculous. But anyways, that has been this episode of Just Onside, guys. In the meantime, don't stray off.